Welcome to another exciting episode of Umbrella's Digital Changemakers podcast series. Today we have a very special guest, Nick Westbrook, who is a senior technology strategist with Microsoft New Zealand. Nick, for a number of years, has been at the forefront of technology in New Zealand, leading New Zealand partners down the path of innovation and creativity. And it's super exciting to have him in today, where we're going to talk about the emergence of Agentic AI and how it's going to affect New Zealand businesses, what the technology behind it looks like, and what the future looks like for New Zealand companies embracing AI. Welcome, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that great intro, Ian.
Nick, I read with interest Microsoft's Work Trends Index, the latest report, and it covers really the topics of AI and evolving technologies within AI. Fascinating reading. And I was really interested to hear your take on it and how you think it's going to affect New Zealand businesses going forward.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, man. So as you may know, like Microsoft releases this Work Trends Index report every year. Every year we survey 31,000 people across 31 different countries around their insights on AI, productivity in the workplace, what they're hoping technology to achieve for them, that sort of thing. This year, there was a big theme that came out of the reports with regard to technology adoption, AI in particular. And essentially, this concept of frontier firm has been born. So what a frontier firm is an organization who leans in strongly to the latest AI capabilities and are using them to help drive their business forward. You know, so adopting Agentic AI, for example, Microsoft Copilot, for example, all the tools that are available today in order to improve the productivity of their business and set themselves up for what's going to be quite a dynamic next few years. I think, as this technology becomes more widely adopted. Fascinating insights on the perspective of people within these organizations as to how their organizations are embracing this change. And we're seeing that the perspectives from employees within the organizations are saying that 77% of employees in these frontier firms reckon that their organizations are actually thriving in this current market. Versus I think it's about 36% of organizations that aren't adopting AI, being thriving in the market. So it goes to show that this technology has major promise, and it's actually being used today to help drive those outcomes, with just the current level of technology, and it's helping these organizations get a jumpstart lead, across the competitors that they have in market themselves.
So what you're saying is we're seeing an adoption of AI and that is increasing globally. Do you think it's around a productivity issue amongst employees?
Yeah, largely, right? I mean, we've seen these stats for years and years and years now. And I know New Zealand's got a major productivity issue ourselves here. The current Work Trends Index survey indicates that 80% of the people polled reckon that they don't have enough time or energy, to get through their workday. So there's just too many emails, too many meetings, too many things to do for us as humans to keep on top of effectively.
Yeah, I read in the report that it's 256 on average interruptions a day.
Yeah, it's nuts. I think like every 2 minutes or something,
you
get interrupted by an email or an IM or something that pops up. So there's just not enough time in the day to get through all the work we need to do, which means that you have this capacity gap, essentially, right? So an organization wants to achieve productivity at a certain level and they set themselves up to achieve that. However, the employees in the organization just don't have the time or energy or capacity to help the company get there. So there's this gap that gets formed. And the promise of AI is to close that gap out, so that the organizations can operate as effectively and efficiently as they can by using a combination of human intellect as well as AI capability to deliver those more sort of routine, mundane tasks right now. And then as the technology improves over time, it'll be able to pick up more of the high level tasks, that humans get overwhelmed with today as well. So going forward, it's very much going to be a hybrid workplace, between humans and the AI kind of agent digital employees to achieve goals together.
Exciting to hear the concept of agents and humans working together in a team. Do you want to give us a breakdown of the difference between an AI agent that we're seeing emerging as opposed to today's generative AI?
Yeah, absolutely right. So the concept of an agent is a piece of software that has a role in an identity, essentially, right? So it's AI driven, but it has a specific job to do within an organization. So you can think about a researcher agent, right, or an analyst agent, or a copywriter agent, for example. So they have a particular role, just like kind of humans do, to produce an outcome. We see three different types of agents, right, on a spectrum as well. So the most simple form of agent we have today is a retrieval agent. So you can think of a retrieval agent as a piece of software that can reason over knowledge and give you an answer. Very similar to Microsoft Copilot today, for example.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to know what your HR policies are in the office, you can ask Copilot to do that. Right. So if we take that broad capability of Copilot and narrow it down to only being able to answer HR related questions, that would be an example of a retrieval agent. Okay. The second type of agent that we get is a task agent. So this is an agent that can actually perform actions, right, either on your behalf or on the organization's behalf. So if we take that HR, for example, agent, as well as being able to retrieve information, you can ask it to be able to send emails, for example, right, to employees, or start processing performance reviews, for example. Okay, so the agent can take actions on behalf of a person. Those actions are particularly pretty prescriptive, though. So a human in creating the agent would say, these are the things that you're allowed to do, and this is the way you do it. So similar to like a traditional workflow. The most interesting sort of agent that we get is the autonomous agent. So this is at the higher end of the maturity curve. What an autonomous agent can do is effectively work out how to achieve an outcome by itself. Okay, so I don't know if you come across some of the reasoning engines from like the likes of OpenAI, so like the O3 model, for example, where if you ask it to do something for you, it can actually provide a chain of thought and say, all right, in order to achieve this outcome you're asking, these are the steps I need to go through. And in order to achieve the outcome on each of those steps, this is the additional information I need, or these are the actions I need to take, for example. So with an autonomous agent, you give it the end goal that you're looking at achieving, and then it works out what that plan is to achieve that end goal. And then you give it access to either other systems or other knowledge sources or other agents even, to work in a team. And then it can leverage these other resources to achieve that outcome that you're looking to achieve from it.
So it's both reasoning and making decisions during the process.
100%. So it's all those three, right? So it's the retrieval, it's the executing tasks on your behalf, but instead of specifically saying this is how you should do it, it works out how to do that itself.
Right. And the fascinating piece is where you have a team of agents.
Yeah, this is mind-blowing. So if you haven't seen any demos of this sort of stuff before, like I was blown away when I saw a team of agents working together. Just recently, we had one of the big four audit companies ran a session for Microsoft showing the capability that they're building within their organization. And this is amazing, right? So you can think of a scenario where you have a client, maybe like yourselves, who approaches one of the big four and says, hey, we're looking at expanding into Australia, for example. Historically, that consultant at that big four company would have to obviously consult initially with you, take your request on board, and then go and orchestrate across a bunch of different people within their organization, to do the research, gather the data, process it, etc., before they could then get the outcome of that report and then run through it with you. That could take weeks and typically cost a whole lot of money because of all that time that gets taken up. So what they've done now is they've actually replaced some of those tasks and some of those roles within that workflow with autonomous agents. So, for example, they've got a researcher agent, right, which can query the internet, query sources like Gartner and Forrester, etc., for that industry insight data, query their own SharePoint, query documents from other organizations that they've done similar work for before. And it gathers this tremendous amount of information across all these different sources. And then that researcher agent takes that content and forwards it on to an analyst agent. And then the analyst agent reads through all that content, makes sense out of it, makes notes, interprets it, etc. And then beyond that, it passes it on to an editor agent. Then the editor agent summarizes all that content down makes it nice and succinct, easy to read, and then passes it on to a critic agent. All right, then this critic can actually read through that content and see if it is accurate, if there's any gaps in the information. Is it at the level that this audit firm would be comfortable in actually presenting to a customer? If not, it goes back to the researcher agent and says, hey, you can do a better job here. And then it goes through that process again until the critic is actually happy, with the result. Then it goes to the final sort of editor agent, marketing agent, for example, who takes that content, puts it on a branded PDF, for example, and then ships that to the consultant to then go back to you and have a conversation about this report. And
Incredible.
It is incredible, right? And all of this just happens autonomously. So these agents work with each other. And as I said, like if the critic agent doesn't think it's up to scratch, it sends it back, to the researcher agent to do further work. And then it goes backwards and forwards until it's actually in a good state. And then, then the customer, can have a chat to you about it and give you insight into what to do and whether it's a good idea to go into the Australian market.
So there's still a human piece involved at the start, at the end.
Yeah.
But it is driven. And I love the concept that as with employees, you may bring in a contractor for a specialist task. In a case like this, you could bring in a specialist agent or, use a specialist agent to put that together.
Yeah, 100%, right. And the human's always in the loop. So as I said, that consultant would read the report once it's been generated before going through it with you.
Yeah.
If they feel that it's not quite good enough or there's some information missing, whatever, then they can manually adjust it, obviously, before they send it to you. Leveraging those agents takes the amount of time to produce that report from weeks down to hours. So literally the next day, the consultant could go back to you and read through that report with you. So it's incredible to produce that level of outcome, output, without that much input, that traditionally would be needed.
So it is fascinating how this is going to play out. So this is basically, obviously, a huge step forward. What is Microsoft's position around agentic AI and why do they see it critical for these frontier companies?
Well, it's all down to that productivity point again, right? So organizations want to keep growing. We want to keep producing, more value for shareholders, more value for customers, etc. With the complexity we have in industry today, it can be really hard to achieve that outcome with humans, which is what we've seen. We're reaching that point now. So the only way we can actually push through that barrier is by leveraging more technology in AI. So from a Microsoft perspective, we're all in on AI, all in on agents. We're disrupting ourselves even, where I think the current stat is about 30% of all new code we develop is actually developed with agents.
Right.
So we have like agents in GitHub, Copilot, for example, produce 30% of the code that we're actually shipping these days, which is amazing. And then in our contact center, we've again leveraged agents to do inbound triage of support calls that come in. So rather than a team of humans having to read through these very commonly occurring support calls and incidents, the same thing over and over again, an agent actually does that triaging now and routes that request through to the correct engineer in the first place, rather than having to go through 3 or 4 different tiers of support before the customer gets their query answered.
Yeah.
And then critically, after that, once the problem's been resolved, the agent actually learns what the fix was, for that incident. So the next customer who has the same problem, it automatically knows what the fix is.
This is what we should be looking for.
Exactly, yeah.
Incredible. So when we look at it, Microsoft is embracing and using their technology internally. From a customer looking in at Microsoft, what are the core components that you think make up the Microsoft path for agentic AI within enterprise in New Zealand?
Well, we've got a lot of different options on the table, right? So there's typically a maturity curve or an adoption curve that customers follow. So from a customer not knowing much about generative AI in general, and then potentially having a play with something like ChatGPT, if you want to take that experience and put your own corporate guardrails around it and make sure that your data is secure and your employees are going to be using AI responsibly with the guardrails that you've actually established in your Microsoft 365 tenants, then M365 Copilot, is the next step that we'd recommend for those customers. M365 Copilot allows employees to improve their productivity tremendously. Like for me personally, it saves me often about an hour or two a day, purely by not having to do research that I would need to do in the past. And things like summarizing Teams calls, for example, right? I don't need to actually take notes anymore on Teams calls because the AI agent is doing that for me. Once you get to the extent of the personal productivity improvements and you're looking at changing more business process improvements, then you would start looking at implementing agents or agentic AI right within your organization. The easiest onboard step to that is Copilot Studio. So that's Copilot Studio is a really easy drag and drop interface. You can actually create an agent just in natural language as well. So with a couple of clicks, you can just tell Copilot Studio what you want this agent to do in English, and then it builds it for you.
Yep.
Right. That's incredible. Once you've exhausted the capability of Copilot Studio, which goes a long, long way, then you can even build your own agents by using professional development tools. So like GitHub Copilot, for example, and the Agentic AI frameworks we have in Azure Foundry service, as well as things like AutoGen and Semantic Kernel, for example, where you can have super fine-grained control as to exactly what these agents are doing. And because you're going to be having a team of agents with different roles, you can actually orchestrate that message passing between them, like I was talking about earlier, with the researcher agents and the analyst agent, for example. So many different ways of achieving an outcome. Oftentimes, it can be really overwhelming for customers. So the easiest place to start is with the personal productivity in Copilot for M365, and then work your way up the chain, through to the much more custom professional development agents that you have.
It's fascinating. So a couple of questions really come out of that. We've heard a lot about the semantic kernel, the AutoGen framework. Do you want to touch a little bit on some detail on that?
Yeah, sure. So AutoGen is a way of orchestrating multi-agent systems. So each agent has an input and an output on its own, right? But as mentioned before in that scenario from one of those big four audit companies, you really need these agents to be able to work with each other to produce an outcome. And rather than having to manually explain to each of the agents how to do that, you can use these frameworks like AutoGen to allow them to almost self-orchestrate. So we also have technologies like MCP these days, which stands for Model Context Protocol. And MCP allows agents to use resources that exist in other systems. So for example, you could have an agent that exposes capability from SharePoint, for example, right? To say, hey, I'm an agent that can query your corporate database of information, and I have links into these data sources. So then when another agent asks that agent what you can do, it actually comes back and says, I have access to these resources, and this is the capability I have, and this is what I can do for you. So then those agents almost can self-orchestrate, and talk to each other in order to produce that outcome that we were looking at before. So the services like AutoGen and Azure Foundry allow for that process to be a lot more simple, right, than if you have to actually manually do that yourself.
So the building blocks are there. There is a very clear path. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I think what's probably, there is always the ethics of this, but also there is the security concerns. How is Microsoft addressing security around agentic AI?
Well, I think this is quite a unique value prop for Microsoft, all right, in that we've gone to market to say security is our number one priority. Even over above, pushing the envelope of development. So everything we do, we make sure it's secure by design and secure by default. And we have secure operations around that. And those are the three elements of our Secure Future Initiative, or SFI, that we call it internally. So for all of our first-party tools, so like Copilot Studio, for example, they exist within the bounds of your Microsoft 365 tenancy, which means that all of the data security rules you have in place, all the privacy, all of the information rights management, protection, who has access to what, all of that is respected by the AI tooling that we produce. So when you're querying copilots around people's salaries, for example. Unless you actually have access to that salary information, it's not going to show that to you. We also guarantee that your data is your data, right? So Microsoft will never use your data to train models, improve models, etc., which is quite different to a lot of the public services that people may be used to using. Because the terms and conditions in a lot of those public services actually state that whatever data you enter into them, they are free to use, to improve the services themselves. And there's been a lot of pretty high-profile examples in the news over the past couple of years where employees who weren't that cognizant of that point mistakenly use these tools with private information from their organizations, and that private information got leaked.
Yeah.
And so Microsoft guarantees that won't happen to you. So we're very much front and center a proponent of responsible AI as well as secure AI utilization within the bounds of your organization.
So Nick, fascinating. The technology is there. It's ready to be embraced. The security is in play. Really keen to talk about how this is going to affect New Zealand businesses. Now, we're a country with small to medium businesses as well as large enterprises. And I'm really keen to hear where you think AI adoption and AI will be in 3 to 5 years within New Zealand.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, right? Because the pace of change is incredible. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Just the capability of these AI systems is pretty much doubling every 6 months. So that's just from a pure capability perspective. But obviously, in order to achieve the productivity output that we're looking at achieving from these systems, we have to focus on adoption, because you're not going to get that unless you're using it. The Work Trends Index report indicated that obviously with these frontier firms, there's a lot of organizations out there today who are dipping their toes and building agents and using it today to improve their business processes and outcomes. In New Zealand, that is happening to a small degree, but by no means is it widespread yet. The report indicates that over the next 2 to 5 years, we should start seeing mass market adoption begin. Right? So 3 years down the line, the average organization will be having at least a few agents within their business automatically running workflows and business processes for them. So you can think about them as kind of digital employees, right, that are employed by the organization to drive outcomes in tandem with humans. It's probably going to take a little bit longer than that for it to be pervasive everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that time frame they're looking at possibly up to 10 years before absolutely everyone has to jump on board with this, or they'll be irrelevant.
No,
because their competitors will be so far ahead of them. So from a New Zealand perspective, if we are struggling so much with productivity today, I'd say it's imperative that we all work to educate our customers and educate New Zealand at large around the potential of AI and how adopting it can help drive these positive outcomes that we're looking at driving and help us compete more on the international stage.
It's fascinating. We've talked several times on our podcast series about where Umbrella, we see helping our customers improve productivity. It's a New Zealand Inc. problem. We need to improve productivity. Are there any good in-market customers or examples of customers using Agentic AI today in New Zealand?
Nothing publicly that I've seen yet, because it is fairly early days, and the technology landscape is changing so fast because this is such brand new technology.
Yeah.
A couple of those examples I showed you earlier of more larger scale international organizations, they're absolutely using Agentic AI now.
Right.
Like the audit firms, Microsoft, pretty much any big tech organization would be leveraging it. And then we're actively working with some of the larger organizations across New Zealand today around exploring, the potential for Agentic AI within their business. I'd say it's early days. Give it about another year or so, and then we'll start seeing a lot more kind of case studies come out, let's say, and the general public understanding how performance is being improved, by leveraging the technology.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was reading in the report that startups are using agents instead of people. So there is a real opportunity for our customers and New Zealand in general to be at the forefront of this change. I read with interest, and I will get the wording right here from the Works Trends Index, that there's kind of 3 stages for an AI frontier company. The first one being individuals with an AI assistant, which is, I guess, what we have today.
With copilots, yeah.
Yeah. Human agents join the teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have human-led agent-based teams. And we'll have new roles, such as an agent boss. Mm-hmm. And every employee will have agents to manage and control and to use.
Exactly.
How do you see this evolving? And how do you think it's going to affect our employees and our people?
Yeah, another fascinating change to work life, that we're going to see over the next few years. So, I mean, as the report said, today we have M365 Copilot, for example, right, which is a great tool to improve our own personal productivity. Phase 2, as you mentioned, was that combination of agents and humans on teams. And we're seeing that today already. So like in Microsoft Teams, you can pull in agents into your meetings these days. And those agents can be like a meeting facilitator, for example, or to keep everyone on topic. If a point in the agenda hasn't been addressed yet, it'll actually remind you to address this point because you haven't said anything about it. So we'll see more and more of that starting to happen, where agents and humans work together more closely. That phase 3 that you mentioned there is where humans become orchestrators for the agents. So we're essentially outsourcing the delivery of business outcomes, to these agents by letting them run workflows and business processes. But humans are in control from a supervisory perspective. So we set the intended outcome, we set the guardrails, and then we employ these digital agents to achieve those outcomes on our behalf. All right. And that's why the report says that in a few years' time, all of us will become agent bosses. Because for a lot of the repetitive processes that we have in our day-to-day life today, we won't be executing those processes ourselves. We'll be guiding agents to do that for us. Right? So if you have that kind of management skill today, around helping coach or guide people, or be very clear about the outcomes you want from your team, you'll be super well placed, for this era of AI, because you'll be able to take those same skills and help drive these agents towards the outcome that you're looking to achieve.
Nick, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your insights and knowledge on this subject with us. Have you got any parting thoughts, I guess, for New Zealand companies watching this?
Oh, my pleasure, Ian. It's been awesome to be here today. Parting thoughts is we have to focus on that education piece up front, right? So AI can be daunting, especially for people who aren't that comfortable with technology. You don't really know what you don't know, and you don't know the capability of it. So if you do understand AI, please help the person next to you understand it as well, right? Talk about what you've seen in the market, talk about the capabilities that are currently available, just to get an idea of what you can do with it. And then don't overanalyze. Right? Take those first steps, start using it in your business today. If you don't have M365 Copilot, for example, and you're a M365 customer, that would be a big question mark for me as to why. Get a few licenses, start playing around with it, see what it can do for you, and then use that to foster further adoption within your organization, because unless you actually start using it, you're not going to really understand the full potential of it. When you get to like the Agentic AI systems running those business processes autonomously.
Interesting. Great insights. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for joining us on this latest episode of Umbrella's Digital Changemakers podcast series.